The streets of Sana'a were alive only moments before the sky tore apart. Vendors were closing their stalls, children were chasing one another between narrow alleys, and the aroma of bread baking in small family ovens lingered in the cool air. Life, fragile but steady, held on despite months of tension. Aisha, a 19-year-old student, leaned against the window of her family's old stone house. She loved nights like this, quiet, starry, full of the illusion that the world outside her city's walls had finally calmed down. Her younger brother, Khalid, was asleep on the rug, his schoolbooks still scattered around him. Then it happened. The first blast came like a thunderclap from the heavens. The ground shook violently, windows shattered, and a wall of heat rushed down the street. Within seconds, the city that had been humming with ordinary life was plunged into chaos. People screamed, running blindly into the dark. The old marketplace, barely lit by lanterns, erupted in smoke and dust. Aisha fell to the floor, shielding Khalid with her arms as debris rained down. Her mother shouted prayers, her voice trembling, but firm, as if trying to summon courage from the heavens themselves. Outside, sirens wailed, dogs barked, and somewhere in the distance, another explosion echoed, even more powerful than the first. Meanwhile, across the city, Yusuf, a young medical volunteer, sprinted toward the nearest hospital. The streets were filled with dazed faces, men carrying limp children, women covered in dust, the elderly stumbling with tears streaming down their faces. The air smelled of burning fuel and shattered stone. At the hospital gate, chaos reigned. Dozens of wounded lay on the ground waiting for help. Doctors shouted for supplies, nurses rushed from one patient to another. Yusuf knelt beside a boy with blood streaming down his cheek. "Don't worry," he whispered, though his own hands shook. "You'll see your mother soon." That night, Sana'a was no longer just a city of ancient mosques and bustling souks. It had become a city of fire, smoke, and unanswered questions. And for its people, nothing would ever be the same again. The dawn after the strike arrived, but Sana'a did not wake the way it once did. The call to prayer echoed through the broken skyline, rising above collapsed buildings and clouds of lingering smoke. Streets that used to smell of spices and fresh bread now carried only the stench of burning rubble. Aisha stepped carefully through what remained of her neighborhood. Her younger brother Khalid clung to her hand, silent, his eyes too wide for his age. Their home, though cracked and scarred, was still standing. Many others were not so fortunate. Neighbors huddled in the open, wrapped in blankets, their belongings reduced to a few plastic bags. "Don't go far," her mother whispered, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "We must stay together." But Aisha felt pulled forward. She had to see what the world beyond their street looked like. At the marketplace, where she had once bargained for fruit and fabric, she found only ruins. Stalls had collapsed into ash, and a burned cart of oranges lay scattered across the ground like pieces of a lost world. A man knelt nearby, digging frantically through the rubble with bare hands. His cries pierced the silence. "My daughter, where is my daughter?" No one had the strength to answer. Meanwhile, at the city hospital, Yusuf had not slept. His clothes were stained with blood that wasn't his. The corridors overflowed with patients, children missing limbs, women wailing for their families, men too stunned to speak. The staff worked with shaking hands, using what little medicine remained. Outside the gate, dozens more waited, begging for help. Yusuf leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. He had seen suffering before, but never like this. Never so many lives destroyed in one night. A colleague whispered to him, "We're running out of everything, bandages, painkillers, food. How long can we go on like this?" In the distance, smoke still curled upward, carrying with it the unspoken truth: this was not the end. It was only the beginning of something darker. That morning, Sana'a was alive but broken, breathing but wounded. Its people clung to each other, trying to hold on to hope as the world around them crumbled. The city was scarred, but its people had not surrendered. In every alley of Sana'a, whispers began to spread, whispers of resistance, whispers of revenge, whispers of survival. Aisha sat with her mother and Khalid in what used to be their living room, though one wall was gone, opening their home to the street. Her mother's hands shook as she tried to boil water over a small fire. "We must be strong," she repeated, as if the words could hold the family together. Khalid had not spoken since the night of the explosion, his silence more frightening than tears. Aisha wanted to be strong, but anger burned inside her. She thought of the neighbors who had vanished in the rubble, of the marketplace where life had once thrived. "Why us?" she whispered to herself, but no one had an answer. Meanwhile, Yusuf stumbled out of the hospital after nearly 2 days without sleep. His eyes were red, his body weak, but he could not stop. Every cry for help pulled him back inside. In the courtyard, volunteers handed out water and bread to those waiting for news of loved ones. It was not enough. It would never be enough. As the night fell again, Yusuf found himself in the company of a small group of young men gathered in the shadows. Their faces were grim, their voices low. "We cannot just bury our dead and wait for the next strike," one of them said. "If the world will not protect us, we must protect ourselves." Yusuf listened in silence. He was not a fighter. His hands were meant for healing, not for holding weapons. Yet he felt the same fire inside that consumed them all. The explosion had not only shattered buildings, it had shattered innocence, leaving behind something harder, sharper. Back at home, Aisha stood on the rooftop, staring at the darkened skyline. Fires still smoldered in the distance. The city was quiet, but beneath that quiet she could feel the heartbeat of rage and resilience. Sana'a was wounded, yes, but not defeated. Somewhere deep in her chest, she felt it. This was only the beginning of a struggle that would define them all. The days after the strike blurred together, yet each one carried new grief. Entire neighborhoods gathered in open lots to bury their dead. The cemetery could no longer hold the numbers, fresh graves lined the edges of broken streets. Aisha walked with her mother and Khalid toward one such gathering. She had never seen so many people moving together in silence. Men carried simple wooden coffins on their shoulders, women wept softly into their scarves, and children clung to elders who could barely stand. No songs, no chants, only the sound of shovels breaking dry earth. Khalid finally spoke for the first time since the blast. His voice was small, almost lost in the wind. "Will they come back if we pray hard enough?" Aisha knelt and hugged him tightly, fighting back her tears. "No, Habibi," she whispered, "but maybe our prayers will keep them safe, wherever they are." At the hospital, Yusuf had grown used to the silence that followed the wails of mourning families. Each time he walked the halls, he saw someone learning that their loved one was gone. He wished he could save them all, but the reality weighed heavy: too many wounded, too few supplies. Still, he pressed on, wrapping bandages with trembling hands, whispering words of comfort he barely believed himself. One evening, as he stepped outside for air, he noticed a small group gathered at the edge of the hospital yard. Mothers lit candles, their flames flickering against the night sky. The glow spread slowly, more and more people joining, until dozens of tiny lights pushed back the darkness. It was not victory, but it was defiance. Meanwhile, rumors spread that another strike could come at any moment. Fear lived in every corner of Sana'a. Yet alongside that fear grew something else: determination. People spoke quietly of protecting one another, of building networks to share food, of resisting despair itself. That night, as Aisha lay awake beside Khalid, she thought of the graves she had seen, row upon row like silent witnesses. She knew her city's wounds would never fully heal, but she also felt a new strength rising inside her. Grief had carved a hollow in her heart, and into that hollow something fierce had taken root. The city lived under a sky of dread. Every distant rumble made people flinch, every low-flying plane froze conversations mid-sentence. Sana'a had learned to hold its breath. Aisha woke in the middle of the night to Khalid's cries. He dreamt of fire raining from the sky, of walls collapsing around him. She held him close, whispering lullabies their mother used to sing. But even as she whispered, her own ears strained for sounds outside: footsteps, sirens, the dreaded whistle before another strike. Sleep had become a luxury no one trusted. By day, Aisha ventured into the marketplace again. Small stalls had reopened, though half of them sold only scraps: dry bread, wilted vegetables, water carried in cracked plastic bottles. Prices had tripled. Arguments broke out, yet underneath the anger was desperation. Mothers begged vendors to lower their costs. Fathers stood helpless, unable to feed their children. Aisha watched quietly, her own pockets nearly empty, and wondered how long her family could endure. At the hospital, Yusuf moved like a shadow. He no longer noticed the ache in his muscles or the sting in his eyes. He stitched wounds by instinct, carried patients with strength he did not know he had. But what haunted him most were the silences: the children who no longer cried, the patients who slipped away while waiting for care. One afternoon, Yusuf stepped outside and found the city strangely quiet. No voices, no traffic, only the stillness of fear. Then came the sound. A low growl in the sky. People scattered, rushing into alleys, pulling children against their chests. Yusuf dove behind a wall, his heart pounding. The sound grew louder, circled, then faded. No strike followed, but the terror remained. Later, Aisha sat with her mother in the dim light of a candle. "How much longer can we live like this?" she asked. Her mother placed a hand on her cheek. "As long as it takes. Fear cannot be stronger than faith." But as Aisha lay awake that night, listening to Khalid's uneven breathing, she wondered if her mother truly believed those words, or if she spoke them only to keep her children from breaking. The echoes of fear followed them into every moment, like shadows that refused to leave. The weeks after the strike had carved deep scars into Sana'a. Buildings lay in ruins, markets struggled to revive, and families lived with the constant weight of loss. Yet, amid the destruction, there were moments of quiet courage, like fragile flowers blooming through cracks in the stone. One morning, Aisha stood on the rooftop of her broken home. The city stretched before her, battered yet still standing. Smoke no longer curled into the sky, though the memory of flames burned in her mind. Khalid joined her, clutching a small paper lantern. He had found. "Can we light it tonight?" he asked, his eyes full of fragile hope. Aisha hesitated, then smiled. "Yes, tonight." At the hospital, Yusuf gathered with the other volunteers. Supplies had nearly run out, yet they refused to stop. They shared stories, laughter even, as if humor itself was medicine. Yusuf looked at their tired faces and realized something: though the world seemed to have abandoned them, they had not abandoned one another. That evening, as the call to prayer echoed, families across Sana'a lit candles and lanterns. The city glowed softly, a sea of trembling lights pushing against the darkness. Aisha, Khalid, and their mother placed their lantern on the rooftop. It rose slowly into the night sky, joining dozens of others drifting above the city. For a moment, Sana'a looked like it was covered in stars, both above and below. Yusuf stepped outside the hospital and saw the lights rising. His chest tightened with emotion. In the glow, he saw not only grief but defiance, a collective refusal to be erased. The strike had brought devastation, but it had also revealed something unbreakable: the resilience of a people who refused to surrender. As the lanterns floated higher, Aisha whispered to Khalid, "Look, the sky is healing." He smiled for the first time since the explosion. Their mother's eyes filled with tears, but they were not only tears of sorrow, they carried hope. Sana'a remained wounded, uncertain of what tomorrow would bring. Yet that night, beneath the fragile glow of lanterns, its people claimed a small victory: the courage to keep living, to keep remembering, and to keep believing in light even when surrounded by shadows. The city was still alive, and as long as its people held onto one another, it always would be.